Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Thank you for having me.
Dude, thank you for having me. This is a sweet house.
I appreciate it.
Normally, like in a lot of the videos you'll see, it's like plants everywhere and stuff, and that's my dining room.
Yeah.
You know, which is like a pretty dope spot itself, but it's very different in contrast to this like bright white modern like looking spot. Do you go by Moe or Fuller, or what do you prefer?
I go by Fuller.
Fuller.
Yeah, growing up I went by Moe. Like even teachers called me Moe. Like
Yeah.
I didn't really have a choice. Like Moe Hagen, just like people call me Moe without even knowing me. So
Which is funny because Fuller's not that common of a name. Usually like they go secondary if you have a common name.
I thought I had it locked in with Fuller, but people still like default to Moe all the time. It's cool.
Oh well. Anyway, so in your own words, who are you and what are you passionate about?
Wow.
Tough question right away, right?
I mean, I consider myself an educator actually first at this point. Like I really try to present myself online as someone who can teach people about designing t-shirts, creating apparel, starting clothing lines.
Yeah.
And I think second, like I am a designer. Like I work in the music industry. I just make dope t-shirts. I've been doing that for the last 12 years full time. And then aside from that, I mean, I am an entrepreneur. I have my own website where I offer design tools. And I just started that a year and a half ago and it kind of just blew up. And so that has sort of become my full-time gig. So I don't know. I just consider myself a sort of like jack of all trades. I try to like move around and do lots of cool stuff, own my own clothing brand. And I try to be a good friend and brother and son.
Try to be a good human.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun when you work in like an entrepreneurship like world, right? Like I do as well.
Yeah.
Things like COVID happen or whatever, and it's like, okay, well, how do I make money now? Thankfully, like we're resourceful people, but that's like how the career path goes. You know, it's not necessarily, okay, in 5 years, I'm going to have the vice president position or whatever. It just kind of like flows towards whatever is working at that time and whatever opportunities pop up. And I always tell people the most successful people in business are the ones who recognize the right opportunity and jump on it, because opportunities come your way all the time, you know, but usually they're bad. It's when you can like know, hey, that's the one. I'm not going to hesitate and I'm going to go that route, such as like the YouTube thing and stuff. And we'll get into that. But how can people best get familiar with your work? Like see the stuff that you've done. You're in a lot of places, but how can they go find you? And then if after this episode, they're like, I have to ask Fuller this thing because he said whatever, how would they get in contact?
Sure. So I try to keep my Instagram relatively fresh with like new stuff that I'm working on. And that's just at fuller.moe.
Yep.
And then my online portfolio is fuller.moe also. That's literally the web address, fuller.moe. And then I guess aside from that, like YouTube, I try to do a video like once every month or two. So you can definitely watch my stuff over there. If you want to get a hold of me, Instagram is the place. Like just DM me. I'm always happy to hear from people, happy to answer questions. You can just say what's up, like whatever you want to do.
Yeah, so we have a mutual friend, which I'm going to ask you about, Ty Morse, and he had mentioned you to me a while ago. Okay. Maybe 6 months, a year, I don't know, a while ago, he was talking about, hey, you know, my friend would be a really good guest for your show. And people tell me that a lot, you know, and I'm like, I'm sure he is. Who's your friend? And Ty knows cool people and I trust his judgment, but still, I'm like, what does he do? And he's like, oh, he makes t-shirt designs for like all these big people. I'm like, that's interesting. And I've never interviewed anyone who does that really. But I didn't need an interview at the time. So a lot of times I was kind of establishing myself out in the LA world for a little while there. So I was flying out there and I would fly out there without any interviews done yet because things would pop up. You know, that's kind of how like that scene works. You meet somebody tonight, I'm going to interview tomorrow or, you know, whatever. So I would do all those. And by the time I came back, I didn't really have space because I wanted every season to be 10 episodes. I didn't really have open guest spots. So I've been kind of saving all these people in my back pocket thinking like, I really hope they say yes because I've had them in mind for a while. So you've kind of been on that list of like I also interviewed Chris Cruzy on this season. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
But
I've designed for him. Yep.
Awesome. Dude, I interviewed Ian Allison, who also ended up, he had played with Chris Cruzy overseas. Ian Allison's like a big bass guitarist in the Twin Cities area. He's like the main studio guy. Okay. But anyways, you were on that list of like people I have to contact. when I'm going to be actually in the area and have like available spots. And then this season is exclusively Midwest people, which I don't actually have much of a network in Minneapolis. So it's been kind of tough. I was like, I don't know who I'm going to hit up, but you've been on the list. So anyways, I finally was like, okay, I got to hit this guy up. So I texted Ty and I'm like, how do I get a hold of him? He's like, just DM him. And usually I'll ask people like, we'll start like a 3-way group chat because they're not going to see my DM. And he's like, no, you probably will. So I DM'd you, and sure enough, you actually hit me back pretty quick. I was surprised. You must get a lot of them. Do you actually respond? I mean, you get fake ones, I'm sure, because I get them too, where they're like, hey, like I don't respond to that. But do you actually respond to like every DM you get if it's like a legitimate question?
For sure. First of all, Ty, sweetest guy.
Yeah, I mean, we can go down that too. How do you know him? Just what's your connection to them anyways?
I know Sarah and Ty through friends. Like the Eau Claire scene is, you know, I feel like a lot of people just like know each other.
It's not a big city.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And like, so we had friends of friends, and actually over the pandemic, like doing like house party and like jumping on Zoom or whatever, they would hop on, and like I knew of them. We hung out a few times, but like I actually got to know them more through just like hanging out over video chat. And then and then that turned into just like them. They're just part of my friend group. Like I consider them homies. Like
they're the like most genuine, sweetest, nicest people
100%.
ever. They'll go so far out of their way to take care of other people. It's mind blowing, and they don't want anyone to know about it. Like Sarah's donated and stuff to things, and she's like, don't include my name. And I'm like, this was like pretty cool of you to do. And she's like, I don't want people to know that. So maybe I shouldn't have said that, but it's just like
I believe
shows how cool of people they are, that they're like not looking out for themselves. And when I met them, because I've probably known them longer than you then, neither of them were doing things they liked, which has been really cool to watch that journey. I'd already like, because Ty grew up skateboarding, right? Still does. They were coming around my shop like at the beginning, you know, and that was when Ty was still delivering like furniture. And I think he was working for Home or Ashley or somebody. And Sarah was still working at like I don't even think she had her vet tech job yet at that point. And they just were like cool people, hated what they did. So I've been friends with them through this whole transition of Sarah starting her business. She was the second ever guest on my show at the beginning because it was like super fresh, you know, and then seeing Ty all of a sudden start doing art and then get an apprenticeship. And now he's a full-time tattooer. I'm like super proud of those people. And it's like really cool to see that transition, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the fact that you're connected to him is like, this guy's going to be, he has to be cool because like I trust their judgment so much. You know,
they're both crushing it for sure right now.
What's your story for Eau Claire? Like, it's crazy to me how many really Eau Claire is full of cool people, but still, as far as like successful in the creative realm, I'm surprised by how many people come out of Eau Claire. What's your connection to that city? Where are you from originally? How did you get connected there?
Yeah, I grew up in Chippewa Falls. So Eau Claire was like the big city, like to me, like if we're going to Oakwood Mall, I'm like dressing super fresh, like, you know. So I grew up there, went to school at UWEC, straight out of high school. And that's when I sort of started messing around with art. Like I went to school for journalism initially, and I was always interested in like doing band shirts. I was in bands, and that's sort of how I started doing art. And that was helpful because Eau Claire was it's always been like a pretty dope like music scene. Yeah. So like I was able to like work with other bands and like do their merch, and that sort of just like they would be opening for a bigger band, like maybe for Minneapolis. And so I would do merch for them. And so it just sort of like snowballed from there. But I would literally like I remember one time POS came to town and he played a show, and the poster that the Stones Throw put up was so terrible that I just went and made my own posters and put them up over the ones they had made.
Sick.
So that at least let me know, like, all right, you obviously care enough about art that you're willing to like spend your own money just so you don't have to look at like something that's bad.
How come you didn't just go to Stout, right? Because most art kids go to Stout. That's for people who are listening, that's in Menominee, which is like another little town right next to us that's more art focused.
When I switched to graphic design from journalism, I didn't do it for that long because I had already sort of established myself in like a freelance sense. Yeah. And like, at least at the time, the art program, the graphic design program at Eau Claire was not great. Like just the professors were teaching stuff that was like, it was very basic, which is fine. You should know color theory and all that good stuff. But like everything else just felt very like outdated. Yeah. And so like literally I was telling my professor like, all right, I've designed for like, I think at the time it was like done some stuff for Newfound Glory, and I'd done some stuff for Paramore. And I don't think he knew necessarily who those bands were, but he was like, all right, so
Sure.
Just to be clear, you're designing for bands and artists, which is what you want to do when you graduate. Why are we still here? Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. So I dropped out.
Yeah.
And so Stout never even entered my mind because I had only been a graphic design major for maybe like a year and a half.
Sure.
But just to get a full-time job in the music industry was like a dream. So I was just I'm ready to bounce.
Yeah. Well, I tell people a lot, like when they're going to college and stuff, you need the real world experience. I was just talking about this yesterday on this. I was a guest on somebody else's show yesterday, and I was talking to him about how I think it's funny that without question in America, we'll just invest $15,000 into 1 year of schooling, right? Just one, with the assumption it's going to be 4 to 5, without really knowing for sure like what we even want to do. We just like go that path. But if you were to tell somebody, you know what, I'm going to take a year off and I'm going to take out a $15,000 loan to start this business, nobody's going to support the idea. Which blows my mind because it's the same amount of debt, but you would learn way more in a way shorter period of time doing something like that. Way more. You know what I mean? Way more. Really a lot of like anything in the creative type realm, it's like who you are, who you know, those types of networks. That's what I've kind of come to figure out is if people like working with you, you have to also be good at what you do. But if people like working with you, then they'll connect you to somebody else because they know that their friends will be happy working with you. And then that will, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
totally.
Getting established in that zone is more important than the paper anyways, in a lot of realms, not in everything, right? You can't be a doctor without a degree.
Right.
But in a lot of these types of things, it's like, I tell people instead of working at Jimmy John's or something going to college, try to find a job, even if it's just part-time, or even if you're doing it for free, that's in the direction of where you want to go. So that way that's in your portfolio.
Yes.
If you're taking photos or whatever, come and take photos of your friends, but in a studio session, type way, or do a music video for your friend, or whatever for free. So that way you have that type of experience under your belt rather than just going to college.
Yeah. I think like the thoughts and notions about college are severely outdated. There was certainly a time when you could default to like, well, it's nice to have like the college experience and like socialize and all that. But like, that was also at a time when like the internet wasn't like a thing. Yeah. So like now, like you can connect with way more interesting people just over the internet and like socialize that way while like building a business. And like, I don't know, there's so much more opportunity. And I agree with you. Like, I'm not ready to be like operated on by like someone who watched some YouTube videos. Yeah. But like, I think college is definitely, I don't know, not as necessary as it used to be. That's for sure. Yeah, especially depending on the thing. Before it's like you went to school and it mattered where you got your degree from. Right. That mattered in the application process when a company was thinking about hiring you. But now with things like social media, with how powerful it is, your brand on there is what people look at. They look at your Instagram profile, which is crazy. Like, but even in big budget things, they'll look at your Instagram profile, who you've worked with on that, look at your portfolio. They don't ask you where you went to college. No. Like it's irrelevant in a lot of these realms. So I just always push people like go that route. Taking it back, I want to know more about this music thing because I listened to the other interviews you did. And I just want to like get a better idea of it. What's the first show you can remember going to, and how old were you? Wow. I mean, I think the first show I went to was actually a music festival. Oh, really? I think it might have been like Ozfest or something. Like, oh, sure. Like Black Sabbath had a reunite. Like they were playing. How old were you at that point, if you had to guess? 14 or 15. Oh, so you were young being around everybody with what festivals are like. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That was probably the first like cool concert. I probably went to like the state fair and saw whatever, Reba McEntire, which would have been awesome. Dude, I heard Nelly's coming to the Wisconsin State Fair this year. No way. Seriously, I just saw an ad for that. I'm like, huh? Wow. I want to interview Nelly. Anyways, you keep going with your story. Yeah, that was probably the first thing. And I was always a lover of music. Like but the two constants in my life have just been art and music. Yeah. And I would say music more so than art. But like growing up, I didn't go to like a ton of shows. Like my parents loved music, but like they weren't like taking us to like see Fleetwood Mac or, whatever. Sure, yeah. So that's kind of like when I feel like the bug for just like going to shows. And like me and my sister would always go to the cities, we were huge like emo kids. We would like every time a pop punk band, emo band came to Minneapolis, we would go a few times a month and just and we just went on a streak of like for years. That's all we did. Like that's all I cared about was music, being in bands, playing shows, like writing music, like wearing band shirts. How old were you when the first band that you were in, how old were you and what did you play? Well, I mean, I had a lot of basement bands like at my mom's house where it's
Right.
just like homies coming over from school and like we're just playing in the basement. Like
So
maybe
like
we'll
when you
play
went
shows.
to Ozfest, you were already playing in your little like homie bands at that point, or was it kind of after?
It would have been very close. Like maybe like 16 is probably the first time I like started like an organized like thing. Like you're
Sure.
gonna play bass and you're you know,
Okay. And then I'm just kind of still trying to picture everything. When did you play your first show? You must have started with like little bar shows and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
what was your 1st show? How old were you at that point?
I probably played the first show at like 19, something like that.
Okay, so it was a
18,
few
19.
years.
Yeah, I mean, we literally were just like I wasn't good at playing music. Like I played drums, I messed around on guitar. Like me and my sister, like literally put out an album. Like we recorded with this dude in Eau Claire at one point.
Sick.
I mean, pretty awful. We listened to it over Christmas break. It was pretty bad. But
Can we listen to it? Can you send me a link? Can we share that like before your episode comes out?
I was embarrassed listening to it in a group of like 4 people, so probably
So
not.
maybe not
but
publicly?
Yeah.
Sure.
But by the time I started like being in a band that was like serious enough to like want to play shows,
Yeah.
it was when I had moved to Eau Claire. And it was just like friends of friends. Like me and my sister got into the Eau Claire music scene like pretty heavy. We had already been going to shows like in Eau Claire because that was like like there was like a pretty cool, it was like the emo heyday, I like to call it. It was just like MySpace, like that sort of era. Like
Yeah.
you could find out about a show like on the same day and go to it, you know, in Eau Claire, just like a basement show or something.
Sure.
But yeah, that's kind of when I started playing in bands around here.
Was she a couple years older than you?
She's 2 years older than me.
Okay, so she was able to drive you to the cities and all that.
Yeah,
Makes sense. Okay, so what was the first t-shirt that you remember buying, like from like a show or whatever, that you were like, I'm wearing this way too often because this one rules?
Oh man, I definitely had, man, I had like every cool like Blink-182 shirt back in the day. You used to be able to also go to like Kohl's and get like cool like band shirts.
Is this the Hot Topic time frame too? Because they were like heavy on those at one
Hot
point.
Topic, like Suncoast Video.
Yeah, I remember that.
I had this super dope. It was a bright yellow Beastie Boys shirt. I used to wear that all the time. But yeah, like I fell in love with band t-shirts. Like it's just not, if I look back, like it's just no way a surprise that I'm doing what I'm doing.
Right.
Because like I was obsessed with like band t-shirts like pretty early on. Like I need like, and I wish I had some of those shirts because they're like grails at this point. Like
Yeah.
Blink shirts, like old like MXPX shirts, Newfound Glory, like all those pop punk bands. Like
Yeah.
I had to be wearing, I probably wore band t-shirts for like most like 15 to like 20s. Like,
Dude, I mean, like, I'm not that much younger than you, so I remember that whole era. Like, I wasn't one of them, but I saw every shirt was black. Everyone was wearing super tight pants, but they had a different band tee every day. To me, they looked similar because I wasn't really in it. But I know all the kids that played music, that was like a big thing. They were so stoked every time they got a new tee, and I just was on the outside of it as a skateboarder. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't really understand. Our local skate shop didn't even have a lot of apparel, so like I had like the same few skateboard shirts, but they were very stock. Like, you know what I mean? I was never into it. So when I know the story, I guess I can gloss over the story because you've told before, but you were playing in bands. At some point, you're like, we got to have merch, obviously. Nobody's making our merch. Maybe I'll make our merch. Eventually, you started making merch for other people, and it just kind of like went that route. What was the first thing that you remember making for your band? Can you describe it?
Yeah, I made some pins and a t-shirt, and I had the idea of, it was like a emo looking like girl's face, probably like inspired by like old like Converge shirts with like the Jane Doe. So it was like just an anonymous looking girl with the body of like a crow, because we had a song called Crows. And my mom still like has the pin like probably on like a jacket.
Is it like a little button one?
Little button, yeah. And then we made some t-shirts with that on it. But like, you know, at the time, I didn't know like what design resources I had to work with, and there wasn't really a lot out there. So it was like, if you could find like a font with like little like silhouettes of like animals and stuff, like you were using that. But I would try to find like creative ways to use it that would work with like our style and genre or whatever. But like that's the first thing I remember like making.
Was that like Photoshop, like finding things on Google and pulling it into Photoshop?
It would have been the earliest version of Photoshop, and not even using Google, like literally like using fonts. Like I would go to a website and you'd use like not Wingdings, but like
Yep.
You know, different like
Yeah, I know what you mean.
characters with like symbols and stuff and like silhouettes like that. That's all I knew. Like
Pulling from the resources that were available.
Exactly.
It's crazy how like fast that's evolved, and we'll get into more of that because obviously you kind of went that realm. As things went on, at some point you stopped making, well, you weren't in bands. During your era of still being in bands, what's your favorite thing you made for any of your bands? The one thing that you can think of that pops off in your brain of like, I just really liked that one, at least at the time.
Man, I was in a band called Only the Sea that was like more like pop punk. Like I think we were trying to be like Fall Out Boy or like Hot Rod Circuit, one of those bands.
Yeah.
And I made a pretty dope shirt with, it just said Only the Sea. I think it was like repeating on the shirt in like a cool way. It was like a good color t-shirt, good color scheme. And it was like a cool font that I like edited a little bit to like make more unique. That felt like good because it sort of like checked off a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
So I definitely remember like that being like, I was proud of that one.
Yeah, for real. Did you keep one or no?
I've like none of that stuff. Like
Dude,
every
right?
once in a while, like I'll get a text from like a friend. They'll be like, "Hey, like I was cleaning out my closet, found this old like," because we had like little clothing brands and stuff growing up. So like found this old shirt that you did for this clothing brand. I'm like, damn, I don't even have any of that stuff.
Well, that's the crazy thing. When you're younger, you don't think that any of this is going to matter because you don't expect necessarily yourself to be anywhere. Mm-hmm. And brief story about it, just because these ones were important to me. When I was I went to school in Eau Claire, right? So I went to North, and we had print graphics class there. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I designed shirts that were horrible design. They were like, you literally used little white rectangles on a black shirt and formed them into lettering. So it was like my own lettering. And it said, "Build us a park already." Whoa. And that was supposed to like look like 2x4s, you know? Yeah. And I gave those to the skate shop at the time, which was called Underloud. And we sold those to raise money for a skate park. So when anyone asked me how long we've been raising money for the skate park, I'm like, I'm turning 32 soon. I was 15 when I started raising money for the skate park. It's been a long time. Anyways, never thought I would see one of those because certainly didn't keep one. The vintage store, Seven Sons, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but Savannah Smith I graduated with, so we go way back. They posted on their Instagram story a picture of that shirt and said like, Eau Claire throwback, right? And then Shannon Nordine, who we both know, tagged me in it saying, I think Passion Pod made that. And dude, I freaked out. Yeah. I like tried to DM them. They didn't answer. I'm at my store at this point in time. My employee wasn't there yet. I tried calling them, no answer. And I'm like freaking out. Like I have to get this shirt, you know? And my employee got there. And then I got in my car, drove down there way too fast, sprinted into the store, and immediately just like, "Do you have that skateboard shirt?" And the girl working was like, "Yeah." Dude, I started crying.
Oh, wow.
Not kidding. She gave it to me and I was like shaking.
Wow.
And she's like, well, you know, like didn't understand. And I was like, you don't understand. This is the first measurable thing I did that my entire career and life ended up being built off of. This, like, I cannot believe that this exists. I only made maybe a dozen of them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I have one of those shirts now. That's awesome. And it's going to be framed in my house. I've just been trying to figure out where to get a poster frame. So I got that one. And then when I opened my shop too, because I said I own the skateboard shop in town, which turns 8 next month, which is crazy to me. But I didn't design these shirts. I had Keith Kors is my tattoo artist. He designed the shirts. And I had these shirts printed before my shop was even open. Like in the months leading up to open my shop. There's like this eagle design, it's a passion, you know? And I sold those before the shop opened and pretty much the rest of them opening day. Somebody for my birthday a couple years ago gave me one. Like they had kept it. And I didn't keep these things. So the fact that I still have them now like is incredible because you never think to keep that stuff. But if you could have it, you know what I mean? Like it would be super key.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is a long story, but like you can understand why that would be important. You know what I mean?
For
like
sure.
why that would be meaningful. So
yes. Well,
super stoked on
I'm
those.
starting to do that now. Like any shirt that I make that I feel like will probably be significant in the future, I like buy or like I request it from the merchandise or something. So like I have a bunch of the stuff I've designed.
Do you usually keep it based on the design or because it was like working with someone significant you looked up to or like what kind of dictates why you grab them?
Yeah, usually it's for like a cool artist who like I either grew up on or like I just fell in love with as an adult or something, but yeah.
Sure. Okay, so you were making shirts then after you made them for yourself. Everyone saw like Fuller's really good at this. Like we could probably get him to do stuff. So you started doing merch for other people. Eventually you started getting in. If you were in college and you made stuff for Paramore or Newfound Glory, How did the connection happen when you were still in college? I assume those connections came later when you had that job in Florida. So how did you get those?
Well, I started working with the company in Florida while I was in college up here.
So they did come through that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, like they worked with, because both of those, no, I guess Paramore's from like Tennessee, but they were on Fueled by Ramen, and Fueled by Ramen's in Tampa.
Okay.
And Newfound Glory was on Drive Through, who's also in Florida. Anyways, Florida connection.
Through that.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I was working with I was getting projects for like pretty decent sized like bands, like whether they were approved or not. Like
Sure.
whatever. But like
Yeah.
it was a really good experience of just like being able to start just dabbling in the music industry. Like most of the stuff they printed at that time was not for bands, so it was like kind of few and far between.
Yeah.
But like the opportunities I did have, I was like so stoked on, because it was literally just like mostly, and I was happy to work for local bands, but that was like all that I was doing.
Yeah. I mean, that was a low ceiling. And
Right.
it's like there's more potential for things here, and you
Yeah.
want to expand. At some point, everyone, when you go through your career, you hit little peaks, and you're like, well, I kind of did what I wanted to here. There's only so much more that I can do in this realm. And then you pick a new challenge. That's kind of like how that trajectory happens. How did a kid in Eau Claire get a job working for a company like that in Florida? How did that happen?
I mean, I feel like I've always been like pretty like resourceful.
Yeah.
I love, like, if I see like someone who's doing something interesting, like I'll typically reach out and like just say like, I think what you're doing is cool, like keep doing it. It could be as simple as that.
Yeah.
But like with the case, they're called AKT. With them, like I reached out because I recognized like they're the same age as me. They've built this company. They're doing working with bands and artists. So I was like, damn, like I feel like I should be working with this company, because like they feel like kind of like me.
Yeah,
like,
they're your kind of people. How did you even know about it? MySpace or whatever? Like, how'd you even hear about it?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't even think I don't know. Like, definitely not MySpace. You know what? I know what it was. Okay, so when our band needed t-shirt designs before I decided to sort of like take it on myself,
yeah,
they had a company called Design Spin, and it was just a database of like pre-made designs.
Okay.
And so I probably just like Googled like band merch, like how to make band merch or something. And they probably killed the SEO game. So that was right at the top.
Sure.
But it was a cool concept, because like at the time, unless you knew a designer, or you could find like some like Jack prints or like something like that, you would have no way of making like cool band tees. And this company was sort of like tapped in to like different genres of music. Like they'd have like the emo genre, and like this is for pop punk bands. And so like it was cool. Like you could just go through like, here's some stuff with like some birds on it, like I don't know, whatever, like some cool drippy text or something, and they would change out the text that said Design Spin to whatever, like only the C, if that was the band, right?
Okay, yeah.
So I think that's what sparked it, and I was just like, that's a cool concept. I want to like, because I've always had sort of an entrepreneurial like mindset,
right,
aside from the creative stuff. So I think I just reached out and I was like, hey, this is a cool concept. If you ever need someone to contribute to this, I'd be happy to like join in to like make designs for you.
Right.
Total bullshit. Like I didn't even know how to design.
Sure.
So I faked it for like the first 6 months to a year.
Fake it till you make it, man.
Exactly. Yeah. But they were a sub company of AKT. AKT owned it. Like they had a ticketing company, printing, like, so that's just how it sort of led to working with AKT.
Right. And it was a quick turnaround, right? Like you filled out an application within a week or something. You were getting hired, right?
No,
it was fast.
No application. It was just my experience in working with them as a freelance designer.
Yeah.
And I had flown down there once because they offered me another job, like working in their print shop, like cleaning screens or something.
Sure.
Which like, cool. I'd never even been on a plane before. Flew down there, and saw their facility, and it was cool. And I was like, I could see working here. I just don't really want to clean screens. I want to like get it into the design world. And so maybe like a year and a half went by. I worked with them more like as a freelancer, and yeah, it was like on a Wednesday, and by the following Monday I was in Florida, like living there. Like, I don't know, I just lived in like my uncle's RV for a little while.
Wow.
And then found a place like with a dude from Craigslist. I'm like still friends with his wife on Facebook. Like, he's a good guy, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what I was saying earlier in the episode, right? Talking about how people who are successful, when they find the right opportunity, they take it, kind of regardless of if they're ready for it. They just take it because they know that's the one you got to go for. I want to take a quick second just to introduce the sponsors of this episode. We got 3 of them here. We got Collab EC out of Eau Claire. It's like a collaboration workspace. You told me off mic you're familiar. They're actually opening a new spot. They're taking over the Antique Emporium downtown, which is going to be crazy. Yeah, they're renovating it to make it look as like original as possible. Upstairs, they're putting in the windows that used to exist and everything. It's going to be this cool atrium like space with like an eatery downstairs. Whoa. It's going to be really dope.
That's crazy.
But anyways, it's a collaboration workspace. You pay like $100 a month or whatever the fee is. I think it's $110, and you get use of their printers, free coffee as much as you want. They have conference rooms you can use, all that type of stuff. Steve's Hemp has been a sponsor from the show for a long time. The passion code or the promo code PASSION at steveshemp.com gets you 20% off everything. They make all kinds of different CBD stuff, including like dog treats, which is kind of wild. And then my friends at Hetty Hut Eau Claire, it's like a new glass shop in town that sells a lot more than just glass. They do art and lots of like local stuff. They make their own isopropyl alcohol for cleaning. We have that on the table. Anyway, so thanks again for the song. I want to get back into the company thing. So you're at a crossroads where you're making merch for people already, right? You could have just gone full-time for yourself at that point. You know, it would have been smaller name people. What made you decide that you wanted to go work for somebody in Florida? I mean, obviously there's opportunities, but why'd you go that route instead of immediately going to, trying to go full-time for yourself?
I think at that time, I didn't really have a full grasp on like what it would take to do it full-time. Like I was nice with like the freelance stuff. Like I worked at Hot Topic part-time. After hours, I would be working on design stuff, and then like I was fitting in college classes. Like I was like falling asleep in class all the time. Like I knew college wasn't for me pretty early on, but like I don't know. I think like the idea of someone paying me every single day to just get better at design I knew that would be beneficial, because like I recognized pretty early on that like if I develop that skill set, I can take it to the next job, or I can work for myself, but I have to get the core stuff done first. I have to get to a point where like I'm comfortable enough taking on any freelance project, like whatever is thrown at me, I need to be able to do it. And I just wasn't there yet. Like I knew I had my style. I had the stuff that like, I was reaching out to certain bands and stuff. And so I was very like narrow-minded in terms of like what type of design I was doing. And so by joining this other company, I was doing like, now we're doing like, like heavy metal stuff. And like, now I'm doing pop punk stuff. And now I'm doing like this thing for the university. And it's like very corporate, all in the same day. So like that basically developed a wider range of skills for me that became useful as a freelancer.
That's the crazy thing. I tell people, I'm not trying to piggyback off everything you say. I know what you're talking about. And I totally agree. I tell people all the time, instead of getting don't worry about how much the job pays. When you're at that like age in that part of your life, don't worry about the paycheck so much. Worry about whether or not this is going in the direction you want, even if you have to do it for free. But ideally, if you can go get paid to basically get a college education, but they're paying you to do it, like it doesn't matter how low the wage is. You're getting paid for this. Like absolutely jump and go towards that. When you got hired, were you immediately designing for things?
Yes. Like not only that, but I had worked on, this is kind of goofy, but like I'd worked on PCs, which doesn't seem like a big deal probably to jump from PC to Apple. But when you're designing, like things just like operate a certain way, the shortcuts, everything's different. So literally the first day on the job down in Florida, they were like looking over my shoulder, like watching me like not know what I was doing, like working on an Apple computer. And I just had to pretend like, I don't know, like I had like a brain fog or something, but like I got busy right away. Like I had a whole schedule the first day, like, and I had been freelancing enough that I was familiar with some of the clients already, which was nice. But from day one, it was just like go time, like threw me into the deep end, like with the sharks. Like I was off to the races. What
were the first projects? Like who were they for? Were they in music immediately, or was it some of these other types of things?
Yeah, it was a lot of music. Like I remember working on Trey Songz's MySpace page. Like that was like, cause we did a lot of coding too. And like, that was when you could like,
oh, you did web design.
Yeah. Like I was really nice with web design for a solid like 2 years, like web 2.0, that style. But I remember working on that at the time. Owl City, like Fireflies dude, like he's having a moment on TikTok. or at least he was. But he was super popular, and I think that was like one of the bigger artists that AKT was working with at the time. So like I was doing 8 to 12 designs a day for this kid.
Whoa.
Like literally I would be driving, it was an hour drive back home. I would be driving by these huge buildings in Orlando and they would look like owls to me. I was looking at owl imagery so much that other shit started looking like owls. Like if I hear fireflies today, I've like Vietnam, like PTSD.
It's funny how music though, like you attach things to music, it triggers memories and stuff. That's like a pretty cool, I wonder, that's a rabbit hole I'm not going down, but I wonder how the psychology of that works. What was the first project that you were really excited about that was brought to you through them?
Man, I feel like it took a while. Like we started working with Haim, Haim, like they're a super dope group. We were doing some cool stuff for them. 30 Seconds to Mars did a ton of stuff for them. And that was probably honestly within like the last 2 or 3 years I worked for them. Like,
oh, so it was like good 4 years before you were really doing stuff you were stoked about.
Yeah, like the music stuff like was always there, and like it wasn't like, I mean, I worked on like actually a good one would be Carly Rae Jepsen and Owl City did a song together called Good Time. Still kind of a banger. Cool. But I did the artwork for that, the single artwork for it. So I used to do single artwork and like album artwork, DVD covers for like there's a band called Dispatch, like stuff for them. But it was just like sprinkled throughout. It just wasn't as like laser focused on like, now we're working with this dope band. Like, then it's this one. It was like, there was other stuff in between that was like, again, nice because I was able to like switch on different parts of my brain, like, because different projects require different things for my skill set.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until like the last 2 or 3 years when it was like heavy into the music stuff.
Were you just a part of a team then working on the things before, and then as time went up you were kind of more in charge of the whole project for something? Is that kind of how it worked?
So it was like since I did web design and I did apparel design, it was basically just me handling all like t-shirts and stuff, like even like handling some of like certain artists would want to work with their own designers, and I would be in charge of like sort of working with them and bringing their art into our world, because the end goal was just printing.
Sure, yeah.
Right. So it was just me as the designer, and then like usually there was 3 other like coders around, like working on website stuff, like e-commerce, things like that. But like we finally got to a point where we hired another designer, and then they left. We tried to hire another one. I was doing like more of a creative director role by that point. So I was also like hiring freelancers, like shit. It was like starting to blow up.
Yeah.
And that's sort of when things went a little bit left, because we just didn't see eye to eye anymore as far as like I think we should be a design firm. Like we have the clients, we have talent. Like I know the right designers we could hire. And at the end of the day, they just seemed way more focused on like, we need to print the shirts. Like that's, the art is secondary. And I was like, man, that's such a bummer.
Sure.
And so that's when I actually left.
Okay. Makes sense. What did you learn working for them that you think you only happened because you worked for them? You know what I mean? What's something you learned from working there that you wouldn't have learned if you just went full time for yourself, like from the beginning, right? Because you obviously learned things about like mass producing that would have been tough, but like, what are some of the things you learned working there that would have been tough if you didn't go that route first?
I mean, I think it was cool to be a part of a team and like see like what like good leaders look like and what like maybe like not so good leaders look like, so that if I start, and like I work with other designers now, and I feel like I'm a pretty good leader because I saw what it looks like to be someone who's able to like give direction and like be helpful and like motivate people. So that was cool. I definitely learned that like working in an office isn't for me. Like I didn't really have a choice. Like most days I just would wear headphones, and like, I don't know, like I had enough of like an influence, I guess, on like the office that at one point they were going to introduce like uniforms, because we had sort of a storefront. And they're like, people should come in, we should all be wearing the same thing. And they didn't issue uniforms because they knew I wouldn't wear one. Just me. So that felt pretty good, but I was like, okay, they know like this is not my vibe.
Sure.
Yeah.
So when you went through that transition into working for yourself, because this actually happens within skateboarding. It's a weird parallel, but within skateboarding, a brand turns you pro, right? When you get your name on a board, that's what makes you pro. And boards sell because of the brand more than you. But at some point, you almost get bigger than the brand, right? And that's when that pro starts his own brand rather than being underneath somebody else. I can imagine that it's kind of similar in the way that like you're working and designing and doing all this stuff, where at some point, jobs were only coming to you at the beginning, mostly because of the company you work for. They hired the company, not necessarily you. They didn't even know who you were a lot of the times. But eventually, you built that network, right?
Yes.
How'd that transition work when you started working for yourself? Did you see a drop off as far as like finding big projects, or were you already so connected that it just like seamlessly went into projects coming to you? Were you still doing just as high volume of stuff when you were on your own without a team? Like, how did that go?
Yeah. So this is super important because the question I get a lot is like, Fuller, like, when do I know when it's time for me to leave my job and like do my own thing full time?
Right.
And I worked really hard for probably a solid like year and a half after hours, spend the whole day designing, and then spend another 4 or 5 hours designing again after hours.
Yeah.
And that was so that I would feel comfortable going off on my own. And I got to a point where like just freelancing after hours, I built it up to about half of what I was making at my full-time job. And so I knew just by like purely by like numbers, like if I'm doing half now in 4 or 5 hours, I can do an 8-hour, 10-hour day. I can double my income and make what I'm making now full-time easily. And so I think being like more of a creative director at a certain point put me closer to like management, closer to like merchandising managers. So they knew me by my name. It wasn't just like some guy at the company designing t-shirts. And so nurturing those relationships became super helpful when I went freelance, because at this point, like I can just text this person or I can email them and be like, yo, like if you ever need more designs for this artist that I'd already been working with,
sure.
Now I'm freelance. And so hit me up if you ever need anything. And I was never like, leave the company and like come over and work with me. It was never like that. I just always felt like if I'm putting out good energy, if I'm like working with these people and they know that the work is up to par and they're happy with it, they're going to continue to work with me. And so that was what happened. Like I left and I used very, very little of my portfolio with AKT because I wanted to build my own shit. Like I wanted to stand on my own. So that was all of the freelance stuff I was doing after hours. And because I had the skill set, I was able to get good, big clients, And so I think it was very beneficial to spend that year and a half building my freelance portfolio, building new connections. So when I jumped ship, it was as seamless as I could have possibly made it.
Did you run into any issues as far as like non-compete things? Or
no,
not really?
I vaguely remember like when I first moved down there signing something, but I don't know. Like
sure.
It was very like, it was literally, they were all just like dudes my age. Like we would go out to like the bar. And,
so
like,
you're all
hang
still
out, like,
friends afterwards?
I'm friends with, I would say like a couple of them, but like that's like one of the things that I learned of like being a bad leader. Like, I'll just say it, like I worked there for almost a decade, and when I left, like the owner of the company, who like I thought was like my homie, my friend, like he didn't say a word to me. Yeah. And I took that personally to do the MJ Last Dance thing.
Well, I mean, really though, a lot of people are friends out of convenience and out of necessity. It's unfortunate, but as you get older, you mature and you're around more people, you have more relationships. You tend to see that, like who's your friend for what reason? Like, why are we friends? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that dictates a lot as to like how much of your emotional well-being should you invest into this person. And it's pretty crushing when you invest a lot of your emotional well-being into somebody, wanting to help them succeed, and you realize they weren't the same. Yeah. That really sucks when that happens.
Yeah. And I definitely like helped that company grow in a huge way. Yeah. And I was very like when I left, I like said like, like, thank you so much for this opportunity. Like, I hope we can still like send me work. Like, I want to be friends with you still. Just radio silence. It was a bummer.
Yeah, that sucks. I'm familiar already with kind of how things work with getting something made because I have my own apparel. I mean, it's not mass produced, it's on a different, much smaller scale, but I'm already kind of familiar. Like I need to make this graphic in an AI if I want to have it cut by whatever. Yep. But for the people who don't understand, can you kind of summarize the process of how somebody gets something made and how it would work through you since you don't do the printing or anything? Like what they come and then all the way until it gets made, like who's involved in all that?
Sure. So let's say you come to me and you own a skateboard shop.
Sure.
And you say, yo, Fuller, like, this is the style I'm going for. Here's some references. Go to work. The more information you can provide, the better, right? So I go to work. I send you some designs. Maybe we revise them a little bit. But once they're approved and you're happy, I'm happy, I will basically just finalize the artwork, make it like as easy for a print shop to use as possible. I work in Photoshop 99% of the time.
Okay.
If it was something specific where it was like, well, we're going to be putting this on a billboard, I would like approach it differently, than a t-shirt. But ultimately, I've learned that like it's better to just leave designs as far as like color separating and like the more technical aspect of printing just up to the printer, because I have tried to do my own like color separations and like they told me like, man, you're probably just making someone's job harder because like everyone has their own method. They use their own software to like separate stuff. They just leave it up to them. Like they know what to do. And so I think if you're trying to go the at-home printing route or something, obviously that's very different. But I always recommend, like people ask, it's probably the number one question I get. It's just like, Fuller, like where do I, like who can print my stuff? I always just say go local. Like if you can support like a business in your neighborhood, that's dope. You will work with them one-on-one, develop that relationship with them. Who knows what that could lead to?
Sure.
There's just so many positives that come with it versus like picking out some random company online. Like sometimes budget can be a thing. Like if you're only printing like 10 shirts at a time, maybe you have to go online. But if you can, definitely print local and screen print. Best quality is screen printing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, there's different uses for different things for sure. Screen printing is a little bit tough when you have to do a bunch of layers. Like that makes it kind of difficult because you got to line them all up and whatnot. You know what I mean? And so you have to trust a printer to be able to do all that type of thing. And I do think local, for a lot of reasons, everyone should shop local. Everyone should support local. If nothing else, just down to the economy of the people that are paying taxes to help your schools get built are the people that live in your city, which are the people that own this local business. So like all of that, I just paid my property taxes for the year, which were over $3,000. Like, and I have no problems paying it. Like, that's totally cool because I appreciate what it goes towards, but that's why you shop locally. Because that was just my house, let alone my business. So like all that comes in. What was the first contract that you got when you went on your own? Like, what was the first big one that you were really excited about?
You know what? It was Paramore.
You worked for them. You worked for them way long ago. Before
that was like
though.
One of the first big ones in college, and that was the first big. That's interesting. I never even thought about that. Yeah, it was. They were doing. They did a cruise thing every year. Parahoy, it was called, and that was the first big spread. And I remember thinking like, man, I got like this is my first step forward as a freelancer. I got to like have my own like PDF deck and like I made it super fast. I haven't done that since.
Sure.
But that was the first thing, and like it was like I started working with Warner Brothers, like making almost as much just working for Warner Brothers as at my old job. And that was just one merchandising company. So then I started stacking other ones. And that's the cool thing about like being freelance is like being able to just like go wherever. Like I don't have to answer to just one company. Like I can get hired by a million different.
Everyone I know in the entrepreneurship world, we all agree the same thing. The best part about working for yourself is the flexibility and freedom that you have.
Exactly.
You don't necessarily work less. You don't necessarily make more money.
You work
Sometimes
more.
you can, but usually you work more. But it's the flexibility of you can work when you want to work. You can work with who you want to work with on the projects you want to work on.
Yes.
So it doesn't feel so much like work because everything you're doing, you enjoy doing. And that's kind of what I'm at too, And people, if anyone ever asks like, well, how come you have to run a sponsor on an episode or something? It's like, well, here's the thing. A lot of people do things like podcasts or whatever as like side hobbies, because people will say, well, isn't it a passion project? I'm like, dog, my whole life is a passion project. Everything I do is a passion project. But, I work all the time, but I love everything I'm doing. A lot of them are things that people would do for free because they just like it. It's like all my hobbies are just like part of what I do. And there's obviously work that goes into it. There's things I don't love about it, of course. But generally speaking, the freedom of being able to kind of go and do whatever is the best part. And you can reinvent yourself and go in any direction, which is the next thing. So you started working for yourself full time, what, like 3-4 years ago? Or how long ago was this?
Man, probably like 5 years ago.
Okay, 5 years ago. And then this was only a couple years ago because of the pandemic. All of a sudden you kind of went a new direction, and you still do design and stuff, but you were saying earlier you went towards teaching and stuff is actually a bigger part of what you do. Can you explain why you did that and what that part of your business is?
Yeah, I mean, it started off just as simple as making YouTube videos. I wasn't necessarily looking to make money off YouTube, and I don't make money off YouTube. But I was like, man, if my intention is good and I'm putting out valuable content, something good will happen from it. And that was just the spark. Because I was the first, I don't know, probably like 5 or 6 videos I put out, which are YouTube videos. Like it's hard, like it takes a lot of time to do that stuff.
More than people realize.
Yeah, for sure. But like no views, I think I remember having 9 subscribers. Like it was just like, whatever, I don't care. I'm just going to keep doing it. And so eventually I did a video that like started to take off and like was so much higher in views than everything else. I was like, okay, This is clearly like a winner. So what does that mean? Well, looking through the comments, people are interested in this like bootleg sort of 90s rap style that I had done for Snoop Dogg. I'd done it for Biggie. I'd done it for like all these artists. So I wasn't like, I didn't deliberately like make that video because I was like, man, I bet people want to see this. I'm like, I'm good at this. So let me show you how I do it. But people did want to see it. And so that led me to reading comments about like what I used and like, cause I was new enough to YouTube that I didn't fully understand that like my muscle memory is just like, it's just like always there. Like I sometimes move too fast and I forget to explain little things. So someone would be like, well, what was that tool that you used right there? Like, oh, like a layer style or something. And people were particularly interested in that bootleg like 90s style. So I was like, all right, what if I started developing some little like presets, little design tools to help people make this particular style? Because this is what people seem to like. So I did that. Very, very like meat and potatoes. Like I literally used my portfolio website to like host the files.
Okay.
But people started buying them and I was like, damn, that's when the entrepreneur brain kicked in. And I was like, this is probably a whole thing. Like I know that already there's design resource websites like Creative Market, like Adobe, like Stock, like all these places. None of them are like specific. None of them are like cool to me. Like it's like if you're a clothing brand and you end up on a site like Creative Market, you're like, all right, there's all the, like, I don't know what I'm doing. If there was a website where I could go on and be like, I'm a skate shop, I love Supreme. Supreme likes to make like, you know, whatever, these kind of tees. I'll go to that genre and I'll find exactly the style I want. And so it just sort of snowballed into like, I'm using my portfolio website. Well, now I can't host these files because I'm getting too many visitors. Now I need to go to Shopify. And should I start running ads? Yeah, I'll start something simple. Hey, I'm Fuller. I've designed for these bands. I have a YouTube channel. Check that out. Oh, I make design tools. Check those out. Very just like straightforward. I'm not like a polished dude. And that worked. And so people just it seemed to resonate with people just like me, just clearly being like a guy in like my apartment. And then obviously like mentioning like Childish Gambino wasn't like a negative. Like people's, you know,
name dropping helps.
It definitely helped. But yeah, that sort of just, that was because of the pandemic. Like I was making the YouTube videos before all that, just kind of like for fun and like to provide value for more people. And then the pandemic hits, all of my design clients go away. Like I mentioned Warner earlier, like it's obviously not their fault, but like they were providing 60-70% of my yearly income and they fell off the face of the earth. Like nobody was touring, nobody was doing festivals, like nothing was happening. And so I just like pivoted to this thing of doing these design tools and just like went all in, like went for it, and it has worked out like very well. You know
how funny it is though, like you wouldn't think what you were doing would go in that direction, but anything that you're doing, and this again is why I was talking about earlier, like getting a job that works towards something, at least building those skills, all these stepping stones that you're taking, you don't realize are stepping stones, but they are stepping stones because they're giving you this knowledge to be able to do something else. You know, like I never thought when I was younger I would care about doing a podcast or a radio show, right? But I started in sales. So, and then I worked in different types of sales, right? I worked for Verizon and I worked for Helzberg Diamonds and stuff. So I learned how to connect with totally different demographics of people. That translated into what I do. I threw skateboard contests and events in my hometown. I still do. I didn't have anyone to be on the microphone, so I had to be on the microphone. That skill like translated into being cool with talking with people on a microphone. It's funny how those transitions happen. Okay, so I want to finish up a little bit more talking about the template thing. So just the quick like sales pitch. I don't want to be pitchy, but it's important when you're running a business to figure out, okay, why does somebody want something? For one, I always tell people money comes if you're good at something. Focus on getting good at something, right? Same with the YouTube videos, rather than worrying about trying to promote it super heavy, which promotion comes later, but get good at whatever it is, provide the value for people, and then people will pay you for it. Money, opportunities, all that stuff comes. You got good at what you did. That's why you got hired and worked with the people you worked with. That's why then people ended up taking your advice for things. Why do people want to go buy your templates? Why is that working?
I mean, I think it is because I was so like laser focused on like actually creating cool design styles that are like super easy to use. That's like, I think ease of use is a big benefit and a reason why it's been so successful. A lot of times, like some of these design companies, they'll make really cool like Photoshop tools that you can use, but they're a little too advanced for the average person.
Yeah.
And I wanted to create a website where like if you decide today to start a brand and you want to design for it, you could go on and be like, oh damn, I would really love to do like some sci-fi looking stuff. Like, okay, well here's a bunch of packs you can use with some like pre-made elements that are like all like, I literally work with a designer who like does nothing but like awesome sci-fi like t-shirts. He's put them all together. You can use those. You can use little like style packs that will change your logo, change the way like your text looks in Photoshop. Obviously, the more experience you have with Photoshop, the better. But I know people that like buy the packs and then they DM me and they're like, so what software do I need for these? Like they've never even opened Photoshop in their life. They'll hit me back a month or two later and they'll be like, hey, here's a t-shirt I made. And it looks dope. Yeah. And I'm not saying like that's what happens like to everyone,
yeah, sure.
But they're easy enough to use and they're professional enough because I make them, or I work with other super dope designers who are as good or better than me and they make them, but they're professional quality. They're specific to certain styles and genres, which I think is very helpful for people. And it just, honestly, it makes like designing more fun, in my opinion.
Sure.
Like you could view it in one of two ways. Although I don't think it's like a binary thing. Like a lot of people will say like, oh, but Fuller, like now everyone's stuff is going to look the same. But you could say that about like any creative thing. It's like this red paint looks the same as that red paint. Well, how did they use it? That's the difference. So it comes down to the individual. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't bother me that like the website is full of different presets that people are going to be they're all going to be using them because they're going to use them in different ways. And I've seen people do stuff with these design tools that I would never have even thought of. Like someone like took like one of the style packs and a free background and they made like shorts and they printed the shorts and they sold them like crazy, like lightning all over print. I'm like, I would never think to do that. And that's why like I have a review section and there's a ton of like awesome reviews and I make sure people like upload designs that they've done. And that like just going through there will tell you all you need to know because everything is so different. And so it doesn't matter like if the same people or the same presets are being used or the same tools, like because it's the same thing with fonts. It's the same. If you're a producer, like people use the same drum sound, the same snare sound. It's just everything that goes around it, which makes it more unique. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think there's two things to that. For one, everyone wants to do things themselves now because they can now. 15 years ago, you couldn't. You couldn't just, if you wanted to record an album, you couldn't. You had to find somebody to be able to provide you the beats and everything for it. You had to have somebody who could record for it. You had to have somebody who could make your, CDs and whatever. Now you can just do all of that with GarageBand and just put out an album, right? People love that they can just do it. Taking it to the next level beyond that takes a bit more, but getting that introduction, that entry level, that's really important. And that's a huge amount of people that exist that want to do that, right? And then the second part is like, nothing's original. Like it just isn't, right? And a good designer or somebody who's creator, a good creator, you won't be able to know where they pulled from. It won't be obvious, but they pulled from something.
Sure.
They definitely did. And if you ask them, they'll be able to tell you. Whether or not they'll tell you is another story. But they pulled from somewhere. There was inspiration somewhere. Very, very, very rarely, I can't even think of a scenario where somebody came up with something that as they've never seen or heard or nothing led them to have that thought, right? My store looks like an overgrown city grown by trees that grow skateboards.
That's cool.
Dude, it's a very unique thing for a skate shop. Extremely unique. The Rainforest Cafe looks like that, dog. Like that general idea is where I'm like, I love this nature involved. I love how zoos do that. That's where I got that idea. Not from a skateboard shop. But I stole the idea kind of. I took it and then I morphed it into what I wanted it to be. So if somebody uses your template, who cares if a bunch of people use your template? If they weren't going to use that, they were going to Google some other thing that they were going to take from and then pull it on Photoshop, trace it in AI or whatever. Like, it's going to come from somewhere anyways. So if you're going to, if anyone's out there thinking like, well, you should just not provide those tools, people are going to use them somewhere.
Exactly.
It's silly if you think that you're going to be a gatekeeper here and no one's going to be able to figure it out. Like they're going to figure it out anyways. You might as well be the cool person that's connected. And all these people you help, you never know how many of those people you're on the good side of that they might present a really cool opportunity for you later on. You know, you might be really good friends with these people. Like why not help people out with that type of thing? I think it's super important to do that stuff.
Yeah. And I think like just the fact that I also provide further education in the YouTube videos, like where they're like most of my videos, I build stuff from scratch and I don't use anything for my website. So it's more of just a thing of like, use the stuff if you want. It's cool. It's fun to mess around with. It's very useful, but like also like learn how to design so you don't have to use this stuff because that's an amazing skill set to have. Yeah.
Well, and it's an entry level. This is how you get into stuff. When people learn how to play a guitar, a lot of times they look up a song to play that they shouldn't be able to play yet, but they're going to learn how to play that specific thing. And that's what gets their interest. That's what gets things moving.
Covering songs. If you start a band, like you start off one way and then you develop your own style. And exactly. That's a great analogy.
I want to know about the Instagram ads and Facebook ads. We don't have to go onto it for a long period of time, but everyone knows that social media is the best advertising tool these days. It just is. Like, it's pretty hard to argue that anything else is better. Yes, I run radio ads. Does that work? For sure. For certain markets, yeah. Social media, you can target them, right? So that's why influencers even exist. Yeah. But as far as the actual ads themselves, you can dump a lot of money into it and have nothing happen, or you can be really smart about it. How did you learn how to use those effectively? And if anyone like myself wanted to learn how to use Instagram ads or Facebook ads better, like where would you push them to look? How can I learn?
Sure. Like, I'll keep it real. I started like e-commerce probably like 4 years ago or so, just as a means of like, I had way more at the time, like credit card debt, student loan debt. And I was like, man, like I need to figure out a way to make money, like aside from this design thing that I'm doing. Like I need to make more. And so I would do like drop shipping companies. I got really into the e-commerce world. And a lot of that is Facebook ads. Like that, be like figuring out Facebook ads or hiring a marketing agency is like paramount to being successful in the e-commerce world. Yeah. And if you can learn it for yourself, obviously you're going to save so much money. And so that's what I did. Like I just started watching every YouTube video on Facebook ads. I bought courses and I just like was like obsessed with like learning Facebook ads. And it is a little daunting. It's complicated, but once you get it down, it's so powerful that anyone who runs a business should be using it. I can't say like enough good things about it. And you can spend a ton of money and not make sales if you don't know what you're doing. If you know what you're doing, you'd be surprised at how little you can spend and get sales. Like if you invest your time to learn it, that is like, it's the most important investment I think that you could make as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, because that has been the reason why my stuff has been so successful. Like people see the ads, it's targeted towards people who are already into design or they're into certain clothing brands, or like you can just get your stuff in front of the right people. And I found like I sat at like, I don't know, like 2,000, 2,500 followers on Instagram for years. And it was just a lot of other designers following me, maybe some people who ran across like something I did for a certain artist, and like they like the artist, so they want to see the merchandise. But when I started doing ads, my following went crazy, and not whatever 60, 70,000 followers in a year and a half. And it's not like a bunch of fake followers. It's all people who saw something they were interested in, and now they're interested in what I do. So I think there is some stigma around running ads and it being like maybe like intrusive to people or something like that. But it's like any good business is just showing it to people who are, there's a good chance they're going to be interested in it. And so I guess to me, like if you can run ads and like just like make them as organic as possible, make them like not too like, I don't know, like, I don't know what the word is, like, you just see certain ads that are off-putting.
Yeah.
Just make an effort, like put your best foot forward and like make a good ad, learn how to do the ads yourself. Like these are all just different skill sets that, again, like just speaking to this, honestly, this whole conversation, just like develop these skill sets, because I'm sure they'll come in handy down the road at some point anyways, aside from just like being hugely helpful to your business.
It's funny how people like have this stigma around ads when literally everything you're doing is advertising. The clothing you're wearing is you advertising to the people around you, this is who I am and what I can do. You're always doing that. Maybe it's not through something like specifically a visual ad that you see in that kind of way, but everything you do, the way you carry yourself is you advertising to other people, this is the kind of person that I am and this is what you can expect. Like this is just a different dimension of it. And I've used that with Instagram. Like I've spent a lot of time watching YouTube videos of this is how Instagram works. So I have a pretty good understanding of it. When people ask like, oh, like how did you grow to whatever? Dude, I watched a lot of stuff, so I understand like how it works. I know what Instagram wants you to be doing. And that has been extremely helpful. I mean, I have now done this show for, 2.5 years or something at this point. So I have a lot of interviews and stuff so people can look and go, okay, this guy's legit. Just having over 10K on Instagram alone, a lot of people will look at that and go, okay, this guy must be legit.
Yep.
Like just that number, since it's not bought people, this is real people. They look at that number and that is important to them.
I know.
You can't, all this stuff is really important. I do need to learn Facebook ads a whole lot better because I've kind of been going through the Instagram side of like, if I work with these people and we both cross promote and do this, like that's how kind of things have worked, and it's worked well for what I'm doing as well. I'm curious about projects you're currently working on. This is like a side small question. Do you do anything that's more just like a passion, fun side project, or are you very strict about like, this is the amount that my value is for everything I do?
No, like, I mean, when I was in Eau Claire, I did a lot of like business logos for free just because or like it'd be like bartering, like the Plus
trades and stuff.
Yeah, like I did that was one of the first things I did when I moved back. Like I would go to comedy shows at the Plus, and I was
Cullen and all those people.
Yeah,
sick.
Awesome people. I love Cullen.
He's the station manager of the radio station Converge.
Oh, dope.
This airs on.
Okay. Yeah. Hell yeah. What up, Cullen? Yeah. Like I went to the Plus and I was going to comedy shows and I was like, man, this is such a dope spot. They're getting all these amazing comedians. They're putting on their own shows. I wish the logo was better and it represented all the cool stuff they're doing a little bit better. So I just literally like went home after a show one night, made all these crazy logos. I sent them to Jordan Duro. If you know Jordan,
I think
he's a comedian and he's worked a lot with the Plus. Awesome dude.
I know Jordan. Now that I think about him, he's a little bit smaller.
Everyone
dude,
in Eau Claire
super
knows
like
Jordan.
Small dude, loud personality. He's hilarious.
Yeah. So I sent it to him and he was like, "Damn, like what? Cool. I'll show the owners or whatever." Ended up being their logo, and that was just me being like, "Man, I love this place. I love these people. Let me help them out."
Right.
So I do that for sure, and like I've helped like friends. If they start businesses, I'm happy to help them and do logos and like lend my skill set to them.
Sure.
Because we're friends. Like,
Yeah. You just have to have boundaries with it. You know what I mean? Because people will.
I'm terrible at that, but yes, for sure.
No, it happens. I get people try to guilt you into doing things. You know what I mean? That would be like me after this saying, "Hey, you follow these people, you must know them.
Yep.
Can you text them about me?"
Yeah.
And it'd be like, dude, that's a little bit of a reach. Like that's kind of a lot to ask. You know what I mean? People sometimes are not good with that. So having boundaries is important. Yeah, I think it's really cool that you still do things that are just like passion projects, things you just want to do. Because some people, I think, get clouded of like, well, I need to get paid this much for every single thing. And it closes opportunities too sometimes. You know, opportunities of something that would be really cool. They're so strict about I have to get paid this much and they turn it down. A lot of times those opportunities are what lead you to do other cool things that you wouldn't get that opportunity for. I think like it's important to think about all those things. I always tell people with business, you got to identify the mutually beneficial situation. And it doesn't necessarily have to involve money. Not always.
For sure. I mean, yeah, I don't want anyone to work for free. Like if you don't have to, obviously, but like when I was first starting off, like if I hadn't done certain projects for either way less than I wanted or for free, it wouldn't have led to the next thing, which led to the next thing. So like it's important to recognize when you might have those opportunities and just like try to look at the big picture versus like a paycheck that you might get. Well,
and even just going into YouTube, you expected not to make money.
That's right.
You know, but when you were making money, you expected to not make money off this next thing, but that's because long term you can make money. I told you about these ahead of time. I always ask the same two questions near the end of the show. When you do things you're really passionate about for a career, you get to have really cool experiences, which is like why you continue to want to do these things, you know, whether it's traveling or meeting a certain person or whatever. Can you share a unique experience you had, like a specific story of something that you're really grateful for, but it only happened because you pursued your passion for design?
Sure. So one of the first times I ever got to go to New York, it was because I had designed for this band called Passion Pit, and they were playing Madison Square Garden, sold out show. And I remember like, it was like, it's so goofy to say, but it was like, it felt like a magical night. Like it was like snowing super hard in New York, and we had gone out for like some drinks before the show, got to the show. It's like, I'm looking around, I'm seeing all these people walking around in like shirts I designed, and I love Passion Pit. They're an awesome band. But like, I remember being in the middle of the floor at Madison Square Garden and thinking like, I'm thinking about also like 90s basketball and like being a fan of like the Knicks back in the day. I'm like, damn, like I'm in the middle of this arena. I'm watching like it felt like it was in like slow motion. Like the crowd was just like swelling, and they're wearing shirts that I designed, and I'm listening to this amazing music, and it was just like everything like stopped. And I was like, this is something I will remember the rest of my life, and it's only because I decided to like open Photoshop one day and make band shirts.
That's crazy. I can't imagine that kind of volume. You know what I mean? Well, I mean volume physically of like loudness, but just like that much of something that you created around you. Like that's on a whole nother level. I know people listen to the show, and I know it does help people because people have told me, which is really awesome, but I don't see all the number. Like I see the number online, but I can't imagine that many people standing around listening. It's a little easier doing it this way rather than in front of a crowd because I don't know how many people are listening. It feels like it's just us.
Yeah.
Even though other people are going to listen to it later. That's an awesome story. I also asked that everybody share a story of a mistake that they made that taught them something valuable, because I think when you make mistakes, you know, whatever the case may be you learn things that then are really valuable. If you just went with the comfortable route and you never make mistakes, you get further, but then when you make a mistake, it's a big problem. Right? So it's better to kind of make those earlier on so you know how to prevent that in the future. Can you share a story?
Sure. This is, I mean, it's very specific to design, but when I was actually creating that cover for Carly Rae Jepsen, Owl City, we did so many versions of the cover because they knew it was going to be this huge song. I used all these different fonts, and there was all these different versions, and it got to the point where I had so many versions, I forgot about like the legal consequences of using certain fonts that you didn't commercially license. So like I got caught up in the creative aspect of it that I forgot like, hey man, there's this other component that goes along with design where like you have to make sure you're licensing the images if you want to use them commercially. And this artwork was on Billboard, like it was everywhere. And I didn't license the font. I just forgot that I had to license it. And so luckily, the designer of the font hit us up maybe like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months later after the song was already huge. He's like, you know, I couldn't help but notice you used this font. Like, did you purchase the license? Because if you didn't, I'm going to need like a fee. And I was like sweating reading the email. I was like, I'm getting fired. Like he's going to sue Universal Records. Like it's going to be crazy. I think he asked for like $300.
Oh my God.
And just for us to license the font like appropriately, which is like $60.
That's about the biggest relief ever, right?
Yes.
Oh my God.
And luckily, like, Owl City's manager was a cool enough guy. He like went to the label and was like, listen, Fuller would not like use something he wasn't supposed to. This was obviously just a mistake. Like, don't take it on him. He was very cool about it. Probably because the designer was cool about it.
Yeah.
But that was just a lesson I learned that was like, all right, don't get so caught up in like the creative aspect of something when there are these other factors that go into it. Like, remember the big picture. It's gonna be like, if you design something, like there's probably other things that you need to consider. And I guess that could go along with anything, just like always thinking about the big picture and not being so like laser focused in something because you're excited about it. Like, that's good, but just remember, like, there will probably be consequences to this later on.
I think you should always assume what you're doing has the potential to be big and make a lot of money.
Yeah.
If you assume that, when that happens, you would have done the work.
Yes.
And put yourself in that position.
Totally.
People, I think, go, wow, this won't be big anyways.
Yeah.
Just do whatever. The problem is now it can't get big because you didn't get the permission for this thing, or you didn't do whatever. Because people do that a lot, right?
Yep.
They'll just like take music. Like, as an example, it was a friend of mine, his song, Miles Boulevard, the first ever guest on the show. I took a portion from his song that I used for my outro. And I still use it for my outro. But it wasn't him. It was the person who collaborated on the song that was singing in the background.
Oh.
And I didn't think about it. And I had already put out the whole first season. And then I ran into this person at the Plus. I was hanging out with some friends and I ran into this person. I was like, oh my God, I didn't think about this till right now. And, you know, I was talking to them, Kate McGarvey is their name. And I was like, I hope this doesn't bother you. And I apologize if it did. And I could totally go back and change all of it. But I used this portion of this song as my outro, and at the time, I think my intro as well. I was like, the outro and intro to my song, or to my show on the radio and everywhere else, is you. Is that okay? I'm so sorry. And thankfully, they were like, yeah, it's totally cool.
Good.
But yeah, I didn't. Could you imagine if things did like get really blown up and I just never asked permission?
Yeah.
Like, how big of a jerk move that would have been. And it was totally not on purpose.
No, it wasn't your intention.
It wasn't.
Yeah,
it was
of
just
course.
like, this is my friend's song. He's the first guest. Makes sense. Just pull it. But
Yeah.
like, even on that scale, I was like, oh no, I almost just made a huge mistake. Well, I did make a mistake, but I'm so glad that they weren't really offended, because that, without giving credit like that, that was a jerk move. And it wasn't on purpose.
For sure.
It was definitely a dick move. Well, anyways, thanks again so much for having us over. I appreciate you letting me into your home and letting me wake up super early to kick it with you. It's been a pleasure, and I'm glad that we now have a whole bunch of mutual friends. I'm sure we'll hang out again when you come to Eau Claire, when the Plus is finally open.
Oh, man.
We'll have to kick it with Cullen and everybody.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.